This is the Last Temptation of John podcast. I'm your host, John Salem, and I want to welcome you to the show. Now, this podcast features me reading to you from my 3 latest books. We're starting with Book 1, The Pawns of Prophecy. And in this episode, you'll hear chapters 1 and 2. Therefore, this marks the first episode of this podcast. I hope you enjoy it. And before we get started, I'd like to point out to you that you can find all our podcast episodes on our website. And the web address is www.temptationofjohn.com. In addition to the podcast library, you'll find the full text version of every chapter of all 3 books, along with loads of additional behind-the-scenes content that's only available online. And if you're enjoying this story as I read it to you, the website will further enhance your experience. But enough of the fluff. Let's get to the story. Few have seen but a glimpse of hell, a tatter of revelation. Yet for me it was my daily bread. Well, that and a good bottle of Jack and maybe a PBR or 2. Friends, my name is John, and this is the first chapter in my diary. I'm calling this chapter 1492 is coming for you. You'll see why in a moment. The date on my page here says June 7th. And the fact of the matter is, I've got a major problem. Again. You see, just a few minutes ago, I finally got around to checking my mailbox. Now, although it was after 6 p.m. in the evening, it was still scorching hot outside. So even the short walk from my porch had caused me to sweat, and I could feel my hair begin to stick in stringy mats to the back of my neck. Just perfect. Worse yet, as soon as I looked down at my stack of mail, I knew I had a problem, because peeking forth from all those dang advertising flyers was an otherwise nondescript piece of airmail, the sight of which sent me into a coughing fit. I wasn't expecting any letter from overseas, and there was no return address, yet even before opening it, I knew who it was from. Damn her for doing this to me. I dropped the rest of the junk mail and proceeded to tear open the small note. And as new rivulets of sweat poured down my back, I read the following. 1492 is coming for you. Signed, M.M. For a moment, a chilling force gripped me, turning my spine to water and causing me to cower down in fear. Yet the moment quickly passed, and when it did, my blood began to boil. She should know I don't need this crap, I spat at the letter, before ripping it to shreds and tossing them in the yard. When I got back inside, I briefly considered changing clothes. Look, I stunk and I knew it, but since it had only been 3 days in these overalls, I wasn't about to toss them in the laundry pile just yet. Instead, I got a 6-pack from the fridge and parked myself once more on the raggedy lazy boy in my living room. Off in the corner, my turntable was playing a Jim Reeves record, and the tune, Welcome to My World, was presently on. Yet the volume was turned down low, so it didn't compete with the TV, since I was still waiting for the baseball game to start. Now look, I don't believe in paying for air conditioning, so I had the shades pulled down so I could get some measure of relief from the sticky heat that still clung to the evening air. And so, sitting in that hazy darkness, with only the kitchen lamp behind me competing as a light source with my television, I picked up my copy of the Williamsport Sun-Gazette newspaper. Immediately, I tossed aside everything but the sports section, since that was the only part that could tell me about my beloved Philadelphia Phillies. And as I read, I took a sip, or 3, of my beer, good old Pabst Blue Ribbon, and settled in to watch the game. But then, just as the local news was about to end, suddenly the station was interrupted by one of those god-awful special reports. Good evening, friends. We interrupt your local programming to bring you an update on today's landmark speech by Dr. Gaz al-Ridwan Mehboo. The anchorman spoke in that silky baritone they all seem to be born with. And he continued, Who is like Mehboo? That is the question on everyone's lips as the world continues to praise perhaps the greatest leader of our time. Now look, I could have continued to just ignore the news and focus on my paper instead. Or I suppose I could have changed the channel. But let's not get carried away here. I mean, after all, we're talking about a 1968 Zenith set-top box, so changing the channel required me getting up to fiddle with a manual dial, and that's not for me. Oh, don't get me wrong. It's not like I still live in the dark ages. I mean, like everyone else, I did have my TV upgraded with a digital box to comply with that broadcast regulation scam that occurred back in 2009. But I'm going to admit to you, I still kept my old rabbit ears, proudly displaying those antennae perched on a black top box which sat on top of that cockamamie digital receiver. I tried tuning out the TV anchorman, but his voice just kept droning on. Dr. Mabou's identichip has surely saved our world from a Great Depression. However, the United States has yet to adopt Mabou's device. Bah! I cursed, feeling the wrinkles cut deeper into my face. Who cares about Mabou? Tell me about my Phillies! Glass shattered across the kitchen floor behind me, followed by the sound of someone banging against the door. What the hell? I sputtered to get up. If those Robinson twins are trespassing again. Yet even before I could turn around, suddenly rough hands were upon me. And before I knew what was happening, a black-clad intruder pounded a hard right into the side of my face, knocking my Phillies cap from my head and filling my mouth with blood. Oomph, I moaned, even as another blow sent me crashing into the TV, where I became entangled with those god-forsaken rabbit ears. Unable to stop my attacker from jumping onto me, my efforts to ward off his blows were futile. It's taken me too long to find you, Baron. My intruder straddled over me. You may not know me, but you sure as hell know what I'm looking for. And with that, the goon unsheathed a nasty-looking dagger from his belt. As fish are caught in the cruel net, and the bird taken in by the snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Eh, Bruder? My eyes lit up for a moment at his quote from Ecclesiastes, not to mention his reference to the Brotherhood, but most of my attention was captured by that blade. Yet I never got a chance to reply, for just then my attacker stabbed me. Again and again and again, the intruder forced his knife into my torso, 7 times in all, leaving me a mangled mass of blood and pulp. Death was not a fun experience, let me tell you. It never is. So you came back for Chapter 2. That's interesting. Well, friends, this is John again, and I'm still reading through my story. The date is still June 7th, and I'm calling this chapter The Nail. You'll see why in a moment. Before we get started, let me just give you a little bit of housekeeping here. Okay, now you're just going to have to trust me on this next part as to how I know what I know. I'll explain all of this in due time, but, for now, just take my word on things, and it will all be easier for all of us, okay? So after my assailant confirmed that I was dead, he held his blade up, watching my crimson-gray blood cascade down the metal. I wonder. He brought the knife to his mouth and licked his tongue along the shake. Why, it tastes like dusty mothballs. Baron, don't tell me you've been crazy enough to experiment on yourself, too. Yet he didn't stick around for an answer, and I was in no condition to reply. And although the record player hadn't been disturbed by all this commotion and was still playing the Jim Reeves anthology, it was now softly sounding guilty through the speakers. Doofus that he was, the intruder never noticed this cruel coincidence, and instead quickly began the task which he came here to do. Ransacking his way through my home, he pulled down rows of dusty books from built-in shelves, broke open my dilapidated cabinets, and cleared my closets of rummage, whiskey bottles, and even my dirty laundry, looking anywhere and everywhere for but one specific treasure. You see, it wasn't cash or jewels or anything else that held worldly value, for I had none of those, and my intruder knew it. Instead, it was something else. Fool, he has no idea what he's about to do. But whatever happens, you, the listener, are here to witness that none of this was my fault, right? So for a moment, that bearded brute paused in thought as he stood among the feathers that were still floating in the air after he slashed open my mattress. Yeah, right, like I would hide it in there. Come on, I know it's here somewhere. And he scanned the room until finally, aha, the TV! And in a flash, he bounded back into my living room. Now I still lay motionless in an ever-growing pool of blood, yet the murderer paid me no mind as his eyes searched for something specific, for it wasn't really the TV he was after. Now, when he couldn't readily locate his desire, he took a step back behind my lazy boy and retraced the steps of his intrusion. He threw a shadow punch or two to mimic his previous assault, and then followed along the path of his destruction. Finally, he came to, "Yes, I've got it," and he hungrily grabbed a rectangular box which the rabbit ears had previously sat upon. "Ha! Antenna stand my arse!" He ogled the smoke-scourged case as he took a seat in my chair, caressing the 10-inch by 6-inch black box. "So this is one of the 3, eh? Oh, my lord is going to be happy with me. I wonder what kind of reward I'll get." And he scanned the sides, trying to figure out how to open the box. When he located the tiny S clasp, "What the? John, you don't even have this locked!" And flicking the clasp off, he began to open the box. "Is this any way to protect one of Jesus?" Thunder shook the house, and the temperature suddenly plummeted, surely sending chills tingling over the man's body. Yet still he looked into the box. Color left his face. He was gripped in a cold sweat. Yet still he looked into the box. His lips began to crack from a sudden parchness, and he tried licking them, but by now his tongue must have been as dry as the desert sands. Yet still he looked into the box, totally captivated by the object inside. Minutes turned to hours while the intruder sat motionless, absorbed in what was once my most prized possession, until at last the man began to reach a meaty paw into the case. Yet even as he gripped the cold relic, he must have realized it was a deadly mistake. "Yup!" he wailed in agony, flying backwards over the chair, unable to let go of that which he came for. My murderer's screams continued for but a moment more, and then he collapsed in a heap, bleeding from ghastly holes in his hands and above his ankles. After only a moment, his shirt began to fill with blood, and I knew that his side had been ripped open as well, allowing his punctured lungs to let flow their contents. Even his hair became matted with blood that pulsed forth from a multitude of tiny punctures that wrapped a picket fence around his scalp. Oh, please, don't be surprised by any of this. After all, this is the way it always happened, as another would-be burglar died a death infinitely more gruesome than that which he had inflicted on me. In fact, I myself could tell you this, for I had witnessed the man's demise. Rising up from a pool of my own blood, and feeling older than ever, I frowned as I looked upon the new mess in my living room. I suppose I have to clean up another one. After taking a quick breath, I hoisted my intruder-turned corpse over my shoulder and then carried him out through the kitchen door and into my backyard. Look, I live on the outskirts of a place called Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and the name of the township is actually called Cogan Station. I doubt if you've ever heard of Williamsport, and I know you haven't heard of Cogan Station, and that's fine by me. I bring it up now just so you can get an idea of my lifestyle. I prefer to be alone. I live in the woods, and while there are a number of other home sites nearby, I don't have any neighbors within shouting distance, and that's the way I like it. My place is located about 5 miles off the main road, and it's a good ways into a wooded glade. I have the land cleared out around my house, but there's still quite a bit of woods that surround me. All of that means I get to keep my privacy. Usually. Oh, every so often I get a visitor, somebody from an elderly outreach center, or a neighbor who forgets that I don't like to be disturbed, or perhaps a group of courageous kids who are looking for trouble. And sometimes I get a visitor like that fellow I got today, and that's always a bit of a nuisance. And so there I was, hefting this goon over my shoulder and making my way into the yard. You know, if you saw my lands, you'd probably notice that the rear of my 10-acre property has quite a few dirt piles scattered around it. And to most people, these mounds would probably look like compost heaps or something for my garden. And on the surface, they are. But dig a little deeper and you might be surprised at what you find. So in any case, I spent the next hour and a half going about the task of digging yet another grave, after which I gruffly tossed this night's attacker into. And then I finally hauled some compost from another pile to cover this site as well. I'm getting too old for this crap, I said as I wiped my forehead with a handkerchief. God curse your soul, you scoundrel. You made me miss my fillies. Amen. So I threw down my shovel and stormed back towards the house. Hey, maybe I can catch the postgame. And then I casually picked up the object that had recently caused the death of my attacker, that thin piece of black iron, and I put it back into its case. But just as I was trying to get the TV upright and fix those rabbit ears, a new Jim Reeves song came filtering out over the stereo speakers. Adios, amigos. And I couldn't help but sing along, in good cheer at last. Adios, amigos, adios, my friend. The road we have traveled has come to an end. Well, that's our show for today. Listen, this podcast may not be what you expected, but I promise you, if you give it a few episodes, you'll be hooked. In the meantime, let me give you a taste of what's to come in the next couple shows. In episode 2, I'll tell you about a conspiracy involving my good friend Pope Benedict. He gets caught up in a plot to assassinate a beloved world leader. Could it really be true? You'll find out soon enough. In episode 3, I will read to you 3 chapters that cover the whereabouts of my old friend Alan Zaris, a man who, like me, has a closet full of skeletons, and an old relic that's about to cause him some major problems. Hey, if you're enjoying the show, be sure to visit my website too, temptationofjohn.com. On the site, you can read all 3 books right now. You can join my free book club, and you can even interact with me. And who doesn't want to do that? Are you ready to continue the story? All right, then let's get to it.